Hey everyone, welcome back to Glue La La. If you're new here, my name's Jess. I'm so excited to keep making DIYs for fall. It's one of my favorite seasons to decorate for. So I have 3 more projects today, and 2 of them are just for fall, but one of them you can use year round. All right, everyone, let's get started. The last time I was in the Dollar Tree, I was looking at their fall flowers, and I noticed these mini mums there, and the way they had them displayed, they looked like a really pretty ombre. So I thought, oh, that'd be a great idea for a wreath. So I took one of these floral foam wreath forms that you can find at the Dollar Tree. They're about 9 inches around. And I started out by poking holes all through the top and the sides and the inside of the wreath form, just to make it a little bit easier to stick the flowers in. I ended up having to add some more holes to it, but this kind of gave me like a base to start with. So then, to cover up the green part of it so it wouldn't show in between the flowers, I decided to take some of this brown burlap ribbon that I found at the Dollar Tree, and I just kind of spiral wrapped it the whole way around the wreath form. Now this burlap ribbon, I'm not really sure if it's actually that great of a deal for $1 because it's only about 6 feet long. So I did end up using one whole roll for this wreath, but I think if you shopped around and looked for some other burlap, you might be able to find something that's a little bit more cost effective if you're going by like price per foot. But this worked out for this, and I already had it on hand, so it worked out. So I just added a little bit of hot glue when I started, and I wrapped it around pretty loosely, and then I glued it at the end. Now, since I was creating an ombre, I wanted to put some of the flowers on first. So I kind of had a guide of where I needed to go with each section of flowers. And since there were 5 different colors of flowers that I was able to pick up, I just kind of spaced them around the wreath form, and I kind of visualized a star shape in my head. So that way, where each color transitioned was the point of a star, and that kind of gave me a guide to be able to equally space these around as I went from color to color. And then you can see the holes through the burlap there, so I just kind of had to move some of the strands of the burlap aside, and then I would add a little bit of hot glue, and I did take all of the flower heads off of the stems just to make it a little bit easier. And then after I had kind of filled in where I had already poked the holes, if there was a little bit of too much burlap showing, then I went back through and I filled in with a few more flowers as needed. And I kind of went the whole way around the wreath except for the very back side. That way it could lay a little bit flatter once it was hanging. So here's the wreath as I moved through all the colors. I filled it in. I made it pretty full because I had bought quite a few bunches of flowers. So to be able to hang this wreath, I took some burlap ribbon that I already had on hand, and I think this came from Michael's around Christmas time, and it's about 2.5 inches wide. So I created a hanger just by looping a piece of the burlap through the center of the wreath, and then I tied it at the top with a little bit of jute twine, and I dovetailed the ends. That way it kind of added just a little bit of interest to the hanger of this wreath. And then I created just a simple bow using another type of burlap ribbon. It's actually the same material, but this ribbon is only about 1.25 inches wide. So I just did a simple like loopy bow, and I tied that on to the top of this burlap hanger, and then I made sure that I went ahead and dovetailed the ends of this bow too, just to make it look a little bit more finished. I love how this wreath turned out, and I love how it uses the traditional colors of fall. Even though I like to add some pops of different color when I decorate, I still always go back to the traditional colors. Let me know in the comments what kind of colors you like to use when you decorate. So for the second project, I took 2 of these wooden pumpkins that I had got at the Dollar Tree last year. I think they have them out again this year. I'm not really sure because my Dollar Tree hasn't really had the best selection of fall items this year, but I just started by removing the raffia bow that was already on it and the twine hanger that came on it. So I wanted to give these just a little bit of color. So I'm using the Plaster Color by Waverly, and I'm going to start out by just kind of painting in the indented areas of the pumpkin. I wasn't too worried about the parts of the pumpkin that were raised up because I was going to cover those up later with something else. So for one of the pumpkins, I just kind of painted in between those raised areas. But for the second pumpkin, I ended up painting the whole thing with this plaster color. And I just gave it one coat of paint because I didn't mind if a little bit of that wood grain showed through. I found these really cool removable tile decals at the Dollar Tree, and they had a bunch of different patterns and prints on them. But I really liked this copper colored one that I had found, and I knew I wanted to put this on this pumpkin. So I laid it down on the top of my pumpkin to start, and I was going to use my bone folder just to kind of trace the lines of the raised part of the pumpkin, but it ended up poking through the tile itself because it's just kind of a thicker paper. It's not really anything that is very sturdy. So once it started to rip from my bone folder, I decided just to go ahead and use my utility knife then so that those edges would look a little bit cleaner. And I just ran the utility knife along the edges of where the pumpkin is raised up so that I could cut the spaces in between out, and then that way this tile is only going to be on those raised pieces of the pumpkin. Next, I decided to distress this pumpkin just a little bit. So I'm using the Antique Wax by Waverly, and I'm using a baby wipe, and I just kind of dabbed it in the wax and then dabbed off the excess, and then I'm wiping it all over the pumpkin. And then once I have wax all over the pumpkin, then I'm going to use the clean side of the baby wipe to wipe most of it back off. That way, again, it kind of gave it just a little bit of a shadowy look, but there weren't any like harsh lines or anything from distressing, like if you would use a paintbrush or something like that. And I did do that to both pumpkins, and you can see this second pumpkin here, I didn't add a decal to because I knew you wouldn't really be able to see it from how I'm putting the centerpiece together, so I didn't bother adding a decal to this one. I just kind of kept it plain. So once I had both of my pumpkins prepped, I thought I had one of those wooden crates that you can find at the Dollar Tree, and I was going to glue that in between the two pumpkins so that I could make a little flower arrangement, but I did not have one of those wooden crates on hand. But what I did have were these few pieces of different palette things that they sell at the Dollar Tree. So I decided to take one of the longer palettes and I glued two of the shorter palettes on each end, and then that way it kind of created a base that I knew I would be able to attach both of my pumpkins to and also put some floral foam on the inside. So I just used hot glue for this. I mean, I always use the Gorilla Glue sticks and they always seem to have a good hold, so I figured the hot glue would be fine for this project, but you could use wood glue or you could even use a staple gun and just staple these together. But the easiest step obviously would just be to use a crate that's already put together for you, but like I said, I didn't have one, so I had to improvise. Then, so that the crate wouldn't stand out too much from the pumpkins, I decided just to dry brush a little bit of the plaster color over it. I knew you wouldn't really be able to see it much, but I wanted it to blend in a little bit with the pumpkins. Then to attach the pumpkins to the front and back of this, I just ran a little bit of hot glue along the three sides, and then I kind of centered the pumpkin along the front side of this crate. And you can see a little bit of it sticking out, but I didn't really mind that too much, and that's why I decided to put a little bit of the plaster color on there too, because it kind of helps blend it in. And then I just repeated that on the back side too to attach the second pumpkin. I decided to keep the decorations on this pretty simple because I really love the embellishment of the tile that I used for the front of the pumpkin, so I really wanted to show that off. So I'm just using some of this berry garland that they always have at the Dollar Tree, and I cut a few pieces and I kind of wrapped them around a paintbrush just to make them look a little bit spirally, and I added them to the top of the pumpkin, and then I hot glued a little burlap bow onto the top of it. I think this is one of my favorite projects that I've made for fall so far this year, and I really hope I can find more of these wooden pumpkins at the Dollar Tree because I would love to make these as gifts for my family. Okay, so the last project is really simple, and it's great because you can leave it up all year long, and you can definitely customize it to fit whatever style decor you like. So I took one of these decorative trays that you can find at the Dollar Tree. I always find mine in the aisle where they sell their dishes. They always seem to have them there with the chargers, and they usually have them in silver and gold. So I just picked up one of the silver ones, and I'm using the ink color by Waverly. and I gave it 2 coats. Now I wasn't too worried about covering the center with paint because I knew I was going to be adding something to that later, but I made sure I got the top and the edges really good, and the bottom side of this tray is already black, so it kind of blended in anyway. The Dollar Tree started carrying these really cool sheets of peel and stick removable wallpaper, and they had a bunch of different patterns, and I thought this would look really cool for the base of this tray. So I picked out this one that has like a wood grain pattern, and I just measured the inside of the tray, and then I was able to cut the wallpaper out using my paper trimmer. Now the inside of my tray measured about 4 1/4 by 11 3/4, but because things at the Dollar Tree aren't always equal to each other, I would do a quick measurement on your own, but those measurements should fit inside of your tray as well. Once I had the paper cut down to fit the inside of my tray, I was able to just peel the backing off and kind of smooth it on like you would contact paper. And because this is removable, you can actually pick it up and readjust it as you need to along the inside of the tray. And then if you wanted to really make sure that it was secure in there, you could add a layer of Mod Podge. I didn't choose to do that because I wasn't too worried about this being lifted up or anything, because I wasn't going to be washing it or anything like that. I was just going to dust it off as I need to. So to add a little bit more character to my tray, I just took my sanding block and I just very lightly sanded around the edges of the tray, because it does have this little kind of hobnail pattern around the outside, so I wanted to show that off a little bit more. And then because I did like the silver color that it was previously, I did scrape it up here and there towards the inside of the tray just to show off that color a little bit more. And then I just made sure I wiped it off really well with a baby wipe to get all that excess dust off of there. To embellish my tray a little bit more, I'm using this nautical rope that I got from Amazon. It's a little bit thinner than the stuff that you would find at the Dollar Tree, but you could definitely use the stuff from the Dollar Tree too. So I started by laying a little bead of hot glue down in the corner, and I made sure that my rope extended about 2 inches past the corner of the tray. And then I was able to hot glue along the inside of the tray across to the other side, and then I did the same thing. I glued up the corner, and then I made sure that my rope hung down about 2 inches off the corner of the tray. Once I had the rope glued down, I took a piece of jute and I tied it as close as I could to the corner of the tray where that rope was glued down. Then I cut off the excess, and then I just started unraveling all of the threads from the rope. So there were quite a few threads in there, and then I separated each thread too into little strings because I wanted it to look kind of free and fluffy, kind of like a little tassel hanging off the corner of the tray. So I just kept separating it out until I had it to the point where I liked it. You didn't have to go quite as far as I did, because I really separated these things out. They really got nice and thin on the ends, but I really like how the tassel kind of looked after I had everything separated. And then I did trim it down just a little bit because it was just a little bit too long. And then I repeated the same process on the opposite side of the tray as well. I decided just to add a few fall decorations to my tray, but if you wanted to take this a step farther and make this tray just for fall, you could paint it a different color, and instead of using that wood grain removable wallpaper in the center, you could use some kind of fall scrapbook paper, or you could even just cut some like a fall quote out on your Cricut and stick it to the inside of the tray. There's a lot of different ways that you can customize this. Here's a final look at all of the projects today. I think my favorite is probably that pumpkin centerpiece. I really liked using that metallic tile as the decoration for the front of it. I think it kind of elevated it just a little bit more. You'll have to let me know in the comments which one is your favorite. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you hit the thumbs up, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell, do all the things. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye!